Jonathan Harper had it all. His life was a dazzling display of wealth and power, where the world bowed before him and every step he took echoed with respect. Towering skyscrapers surrounded him, and sleek luxury cars lined the streets like polished jewels. Private jets waited at his command, and when he entered a room, the crowd stood in awe, applauding his every word. His phone never stopped ringing, a symphony of business calls, deals, and demands. He was a king, a master of the empire he built, Harper Global Industries. To the outside world, he was untouchable, the epitome of success. But beneath the surface, something was missing. The smiles that greeted him every day were hollow. The laughter that followed him felt rehearsed. The women who swarmed around him didn't care for him. They cared for his wealth, for the life he could offer them. They clung to his name, his fortune, not his soul. Jonathan was surrounded by admiration, but he was alone in a world full of people. Every night, after the grand dinners, the endless meetings, and the relentless applause, he sat in his mansion, feeling the emptiness grow inside him. The lights in his mansion were always on, but his heart was dark, the silence suffocating. He longed for something real, something that wasn't built on the illusion of his success. And so, in the quiet of his luxury, he asked himself the same question every night: does anyone love me for me? Jonathan had always believed that Susan was different. She wasn't like the others, or so he thought. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in him. Not his wealth, not his empire, but him, the man behind it all. For months, they built a connection, and Jonathan allowed himself to dream of a future with her. He bought her a ring, he planned a life together, and he was ready to give her everything. But that morning shattered it all. He had arrived at the office early, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of their upcoming wedding, when he found them, Susan and his chief financial officer, locked in an embrace, laughing, kissing, as if he were nothing but a fleeting memory. The shock hit him like a wave, cold and unforgiving. He said nothing, turned around, and walked away. That day, something inside him broke. He called off the wedding, fired the CFO, and retreated into the silence of his mansion. For days, he remained hidden, isolated from the world. No one saw him, not even Sarah, his loyal assistant. People thought he was traveling abroad, but he stayed home, drowning in his own questions, his own pain. Was he not enough? If he were just a man with nothing, would anyone still choose him? As the storm raged outside, Jonathan stood by the window, the rain lashing against the glass, and whispered to himself, "I'm going to find out." With resolve hardening in his chest, he picked up the phone and called Sarah. "Get me an old shirt, torn trousers, and slippers," he commanded. "No designer clothes, no watch, no car. I want to look like a man with nothing." Jonathan's transformation was subtle, yet profound. He stopped shaving, letting his beard grow wild and untamed, a reflection of the chaos swirling inside him. He discarded his tailored suits for old, faded t-shirts and jeans with holes in the knees. His shoes, once polished to perfection, now gathered dust. He let go of the watch that once signified his wealth and status, leaving it behind as if shedding a skin he no longer recognized. No more business calls, no more luxury cars, no more bodyguards or drivers following his every move. He packed a small bag and slipped out of his mansion before the sun had even risen. The housekeepers assumed he had gone on a business trip, but no one knew where he was going, not even his parents. He found a small, run-down room in a dilapidated part of the city. The walls were cracked, the window had no curtain, and the mattress reeked of dust and neglect. But Jonathan didn't complain. This was what he wanted. He wanted to know what it felt like to have nothing. Day after day, he walked the streets, doing manual labor, pushing wheelbarrows, helping carpenters, washing cars, earning small, crumpled bills that he stuffed into his pockets. For the first time in years, no one recognized him. And it was liberating. He felt invisible, but in a way, it was freeing. At night, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the peeling calendar on the wall, contemplating his life. The man he had been, powerful, admired, feared, felt like a distant memory. He spoke little, smiled even less. He was just another face in the crowd, and somehow it felt good. The world moved around him, oblivious to his presence, and for once, Jonathan felt like he could finally breathe. The dates were everything Jonathan had feared and more. Each one, a harsh reminder of the world he no longer wanted to be a part of. The first was Tina, a model with thousands of Instagram followers, a woman whose beauty and fame spoke volumes before she even said a word. Jonathan sat at a cheap roadside restaurant, his worn-out t-shirt sticking to his back, his shoes caked in dirt. When Tina arrived, her heels clicking against the concrete, she took one look at him, frowned, and looked around as if expecting the real person to show up. "You're the one?" she scoffed, eyes scanning his ragged appearance. "Yes, thank you for coming," Jonathan replied, his voice calm despite the sting of her obvious disgust. She didn't even wait for the water to arrive. She grabbed her bag and left, muttering under her breath about how she couldn't possibly stay. Jonathan sat alone, staring at the empty chair across from him. The second date wasn't any better. Debbie, a sharp and ambitious lawyer, was all questions, probing his past, his family, his background. "What kind of work do you do?" she asked, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jonathan answered her questions carefully, hiding the truth behind layers of politeness. But it was clear she wasn't interested in him as a person. She was sizing him up like a potential investment, measuring the worth of a man based on his earning potential. When the meal arrived, she stood up, coldly telling him, "I'll call you." She never did. Then came Sandra, soft-spoken and gentle, the one Jonathan thought might be different. They talked for hours about life, dreams, struggles. She smiled at him with warmth, showing understanding when he spoke of his hardships. For the first time, he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could see him for who he truly was. But the next morning, a message from her shattered that fragile hope. "Hey, love, I didn't want to ask, but I'm in a tough spot," she began, detailing how she had no money for rent and no food to eat. Jonathan sat in his small room, staring at the message. His heart sank. Once again, he had been seen as a wallet, not a person. A few days later, Jonathan realized the truth. No one wanted him. They wanted what they thought he could give them. Then came Ariana. She was different, unmistakably so. Jonathan had almost given up on the idea that someone could see beyond the surface, but Ariana saw him. Not the man with power or money, but the man who was tired, the man who was just trying to survive. She appeared one rainy evening, an umbrella in one hand, a nylon bag in the other. She stopped when she saw him huddled under a leaking roof, shivering from the cold. Her eyes weren't full of pity or judgment, but of concern. "So, you're getting wet?" she asked, her voice gentle, as she offered him a small container of rice and beans. "I cooked it for myself, but please, eat," she said, her hands offering the food with quiet grace. Jonathan took the food slowly, hardly believing that someone could be so kind without expecting anything in return. She didn't ask for his name, didn't ask about his past. She simply offered him a moment of humanity. As the rain grew heavier, Ariana offered him her scarf, a simple act of kindness that left Jonathan speechless. She didn't take photos for social media, didn't make a show of her good deed. She just sat with him, shared her warmth, and in that moment, Jonathan felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The next few days were different. Ariana kept returning, bringing him food, offering him company. She had no reason to be kind to him, but she was, and Jonathan couldn't help but admire her. He learned about her life, her struggles, her dreams. She was a school teacher and a seamstress, trying to make ends meet in a world that often overlooked people like her. But what stood out the most to Jonathan wasn't her humble life. It was her heart. She saw him, not as a rich man fallen from grace, but as a human being worthy of love and respect. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt like someone truly cared for him. Not for his name, not for his wealth, but for the person he was. And as he stood there, with her kindness wrapped around him like a blanket, Jonathan knew that he had finally found the one thing he had been searching for: love. Pure and simple. Jonathan's life had become a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, torn between the love he had found in Ariana and the cold expectations of his family. His parents, wealthy and powerful, couldn't understand why he would choose a woman who was beneath him in their eyes. His mother insisted he needed someone who could navigate their world, someone with power, grace, and status. She spoke of Tenny, the daughter of a high-profile politician, as if she were a perfect match for him, someone who would protect the family's legacy. But Jonathan knew in his heart that the woman who mattered to him was Ariana, a woman who had never once tried to use him for his name or fortune. She had loved him for who he was. not what he had. The battle between love and legacy raged in his mind, each day filled with an unbearable tension. When his parents insisted he marry Tenny to secure their family's future, Jonathan realized he had a choice to make: lose Ariana and return to the life he had once known, or fight for a love that felt like the truest thing in his life. One evening, after another heated conversation with his mother, Jonathan made a decision. He called Ariana, his voice trembling with the weight of what he was about to do. "I'm choosing you," he whispered, the words tasting like freedom and fear all at once. "I don't care about the legacy, the company, the wealth. I want to build a life with you." As he stood before his parents the next morning, the weight of his choice heavy on his shoulders, Jonathan knew that his decision would change everything. The life they had planned for him, the empire, the name, he was willing to throw it all away for the woman who had shown him what love truly meant. "I'm done," he said quietly, looking his mother in the eye. "I won't marry Tenny. I'm going to marry Ariana." The silence in the room was deafening. His mother's face hardened, her disappointment palpable. But Jonathan didn't waver. He had chosen love, and no matter the consequences, he would never regret it. The day Jonathan made his choice was the day everything shifted. He walked away from the life he had been born into, the legacy he had been groomed to carry, and towards a future he wasn't sure would be accepted by anyone. He told his parents, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him, that he would not marry Tenny, the perfect match they had arranged for him. He would marry Ariana. The silence that followed was suffocating, but Jonathan stood firm. His mother's face twisted in disbelief, and his father remained silent as always, but Jonathan didn't care. For the first time, he felt free, the weight of expectations falling from his shoulders like 1,000-pound stone. But his family wasn't ready to let go. They demanded that he choose the family name or the woman who, to them, would never be enough. Jonathan knew, without a doubt, what he had to do. He wasn't afraid to lose his wealth, his position, or his inheritance. They could strip him of everything, but they could never take away his love for Ariana. And so he made the hardest decision of all. He walked away from everything, leaving the mansion, the boardrooms, the luxurious life behind. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. He knew his parents would never accept it. But nothing could shake his resolve. Ariana was his future, not the cold, sterile world of wealth and power. She had shown him love, not because of what he had, but for who he was. As Jonathan and Ariana stood together, side by side, facing a world that would never fully understand their choices, they didn't need anyone's approval. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. Love had won, and in that quiet, powerful victory, Jonathan found peace. Jonathan and Ariana's wedding day was nothing like the grand events he had once attended, filled with wealth and political connections. This day, this moment, was entirely different, intimate, pure, and full of love. The world may have gathered in hushed curiosity, but inside the estate gates, it was not about power, money, or status. It was about two souls coming together, uniting not as a billionaire and a teacher, but as two people who had fought for a love that the world did not understand. The media buzzed outside, but Jonathan and Ariana were in their own world, where nothing else mattered except the promise they were about to make. As Ariana walked down the aisle, dressed in a simple, elegant white gown, she radiated beauty and grace, not because of the dress, but because of the love she had given and received. Jonathan's heart pounded as he watched her, his eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hold back. She was the queen of his heart, the woman who had shown him the truest form of love, without pretenses, without expectations. When she reached him, her eyes met his, and without words, they shared an unspoken vow that no matter what the world said, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, they would walk it together. The priest's words echoed in the room, but it was the silence between them that spoke the loudest. As Jonathan slid the ring onto Ariana's finger, he whispered, "I will love you always, no matter the cost." The crowd erupted into applause, but for Jonathan and Ariana, the world outside faded away. In that moment, they had everything they needed. With hearts full of hope and hands tightly clasped, they stepped forward into a future built on love, free from the chains of status, expectations, and fear. And for the first time in his life, Jonathan knew that true happiness was never about what he had. It was about who he had beside him.